Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. It's me, your host, Max Pears. I'm glad to have you here, and I hope that you're playing and are making the games that you all love. But not only is it just me, I'm joined by an absolutely fantastic guest. We've been trying to do this for a while, but we're here. The magic is finally about to go down. Big round of applause for Peter Field. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you.
But before we go on, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by none other than GameDev.tv. For those of you who don't know, they are a phenomenal resource which helps you who may not have any experience to those looking to grow and improve their experience and knowledge on game dev related tools, whether that be programming, design, or art. All of these you can find on their website. And not only are they a great resource, but they've teamed up with myself to give you a phenomenal discount. If you go on and follow through the links that I've got down below, which give you a range of courses, you'll find that there is amazing discounts of over 80%. Normally a course costs around about £200, but luckily with the codes that we've got, and should I say the links down below, you'll get them for what would be about 40 to 50 bucks around that benchmark. So if you're looking to go for it, this is a great place to start your learning. I personally am going through the Unity Beginners 3D C# course myself, and I'm really enjoying it with great tutors like Rick and Sam, which have previously been on this podcast as well. So if you're looking to improve your skills, head no further than GameDev.tv. All of the links to the great courses will be down in the description below. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, quarantine finally got us into a place where we can do this.
That's all we needed was a pandemic. We don't ask for much from the world. That was it. We nailed it.
We are definitely, this is glass half full. We're making the most of being stuck indoors now.
This is, I got a little checkboard. This is done off it. So boom, got it sorted. But mate, thank you again for joining me. And for those in the show.
My pleasure.
Oh man, like I said, we've been having to finally get you over here and get this done. You know, the powers that be have finally lined up. God was like, these two need to get together. I know what to do. Stick it in a field of locusts and throw down a pandemic. For those who don't know, mate, do you mind giving a bit of an introduction to who you are and how you got involved in level design?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Peter. I'm a game designer at Media Molecule. We've just shipped Dreams on PlayStation 4. Previously, before that, I was at Naughty Dog for a few years where I worked on Uncharted 3 and The Last of Us. And I started my career at Ninja Theory, where I worked on Enslaved. So the first 3 jobs were very basically like I was a designer, and most of the work was level design. And it's changed a lot in recent years because Dreams requires you to put on a lot of different hats and work on a lot of different things, not just building games, but building tools to make games and things like that. But yeah, I think my happy place where I enjoy my work the most is level design. And we still do a lot of that in Dreams as well. But that's been my journey through the industry. But initially, I think I kind of wanted to be a games artist. And then I went and studied games at UCLan, and I realized that when we were talking about game mechanics, there was a lot of people there were artists that cared a lot, that didn't seem to care about the game design, but they wanted to care. They cared about the aesthetics of the game. And I was very much. I think this is a really good tip for anyone: is just follow your gut, follow your passion, and just listen to what your interests are telling you. Because I was like getting really impassioned about game mechanics and and level design and things like that. So I just listened to that and just sort of like focused all of my efforts into making a portfolio that would get me into a game design job, and that worked out. That was good.
And when you say
I've tried to listen to that ever since.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, mate, but I think it's a good point that you raised for people that listen. You say you focused your portfolio on design there, mate. So what is it that you put in your portfolio to help you stand out when you're coming through your studies?
So I think I just spent more time trying to make examples of work which show game design and level design that I did like beautiful art, because you only have a finite amount of time that you can spend on any project.
Yeah.
And if you want it to look really beautiful, you're going to have to spend 100% of your time on the art. Yeah. And I just made sure that my art was serviceable. I think actually they still use one of my projects as an example on the course, even though like this was like 11 years ago. It looks pretty ropey now compared to what you can do with a PC now. But the tutor actually gives it, uses it as an example, because it's the smallest, most condensed piece of work that you could
Yeah.
ever hand in and still get a good mark for. And he was like, it's because Peter wanted to work on this other thing so that he could get a game design job. So he just sort of did the bare minimum, but it doesn't mean that you can't get a good mark. It just means he was just like, this is like condensed game design, push it to one side, done, tick that box, and then move on to other stuff. So yeah, I think I was always working on like really small, elegant, tight mechanics that could be communicated in like one page or more. So it was always sort of like rock, paper, scissors, like mechanics. And like there was always an option for the player. Whatever kind of game you're making, you want to give the player options. So there was always an option for the player, no matter what situation you got into, so you were never stuck and things like that. It's quite hard to talk about, but there's just certain things that I think come across really well in like a small game design pitch.
Yeah, no, I think that's always one of the toughest questions, I think, for especially people just coming out of a course at university, is how to tailor your portfolio for design, because there's a lot of different aspects of design as well. It's trying to, as you say, show it in such a way that's appealing but easily understandable as well, because you're not working on a project that sometimes is understood, so you're trying to sell what you're making in a quick, readable way.
And it's also important to remember that you're not going to have to do everything when you're in a job. So for example, if I was applying for a level design job, I wouldn't design a level and then I wouldn't art it up and then give it to an artist. And a lot of students, because they have to wear all the hats when they're making like projects for submission, they might think that they might have to go onto the Unreal Store and download nice arted assets and then put them in a level and then light it nicely and then put sound effects in. You don't. You basically have to put in the bare minimum amount of geometry that will communicate your intentions for the level. So if you're like blocking out a level, you've got to think of it almost like sketching a storyboard for a film or like making a demo for a song. You're not playing all of the instruments perfectly. You're just communicating to the band what you want them to be, the mood that you want them to play to, or you're communicating to your cinematographer what angles you want to do, what angles you want to shoot. So if I block out a level, there might be areas that are quite detailed, but that's because I want to communicate that detail to the artist and to the animator. So I might have like a blank room with like some boxes that are representing furniture, and then like there might be a really detailed corner with like a really detailed door with specific like holes broken in the door so that you can see through that. And then like people will know which bits they need to pay attention to and which bits they don't because of that detail. And I advise any student to do the same. Basically, like, don't try and be an artist and a designer and an audio engineer and a programmer. Just communicate the one skill that you want to be doing professionally, and that might be level design. So block something out really, really nicely. You can definitely tell if a space is nice to move around even at a very early blocked out stage, I think.
No, I agree with you, mate. I think that's always something that, because I had a chat with the community on this the other day. We were chatting about like lighting up levels, and I was saying, like you mentioned, lighting there to help signify where you want people to go, what to try help guide. But at the end of the day, you probably won't be touching that at all. You might put some placeholders, like you said, to indicate to the lighting artist, this is a really important area. Make sure we highlight this, please. I think I agree with you. I think a lot of people get overwhelmed with, I have to do this, I have to do that, and like all of this overload, when actually, like I say, just keep it clean and work on the sections that you want to work on. So I agree with that.
It takes a lot of the pressure off yourself as well. As soon as you put one arted up asset in there, it sticks out and you feel like everything has to be brought up to that level. You just keep everything as a box or a cylinder, just make sure every texture is just plain white, and then you won't freak out about the standard of the graphics because it's clear that it's all placeholder.
No, I had someone message me the other day actually saying that they felt embarrassed that their portfolio just had their level that they'd done for a portfolio was just all the blocks. And I was like, why are you embarrassed? That's what as a level designer, that's what you'll be using, mate. So good job. Keep it like that. Because like I said, as soon as you overload that, that's when your brain goes.
Yeah, definitely.
So after that, you then went to Ninja Theory. And how was that experience? I didn't realize you worked on Enslaved. I enjoyed Enslaved. Really good game.
I loved it. I thought that was such a good experience. I was just very hungry. I wanted to get stuck in, and that was exactly the kind of project that I wanted to get stuck into. Sort of, it definitely. I was there for quite a long time, and I saw the project evolve as the team had these massive aspirations, and then they got sort of like squidged down into a container that could possibly be shipped, if you know what I mean. So our smallest ever enemy in the pitch documents was the sea dog, which was this
Oh,
gigantic sort of bust-sized creature. That was the smallest enemy.
jeez
That
Louise.
was our biggest enemy when the game shipped, if you
I
know
was
what I
going to
mean.
say, I
So
was like, how big were you going for?
yeah, it was huge. It was really ambitious. It was great, but there was a lot of level design of the kind that I really enjoyed prototyping in that game,
Yeah.
and yeah, I had a really good time doing that. And they were really good with juniors. I have to say, like the guy that got me my job there, Mark Davies, who was like the lead designer on that project.
Oh, I
He
know.
was
I've met Mark. Yeah. I've met him a couple of
yeah,
times. Yeah. Shit. All right.
he
Small
was
industry.
fantastic. Yeah, it's a tiny industry, but yeah, he really gave us like fun jobs to do, if you know what I mean. You could
Yeah.
definitely just get a junior designer to just sort of map grab edges around every sort of bit of geometry and map blocking volumes so that people can't escape the level. He didn't. He just gave us levels and helped
Yeah.
us where we needed help, and it was just fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
I've
Because I
got a lot
think,
of love for Ninja Theory.
yeah, well, man, they've been doing great stuff. Like I love that DMC. I thought was great level design in that one. I like, despite all
Mm.
the controversy of changing up Dante and stuff, like that game was a solid game. Like really one of my favorites. The attitude and everything. And then Hellblade, what they did with Disney Infinity, the help on that. So yeah, they've and now Bleeding Edge, and I don't know what the next. They got obviously got other things going on.
They've got Hellblade 2 coming at
Yeah,
some point, don't they? They've announced that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, strength to strength, and now obviously they've got Microsoft money behind them to hopefully help push get the money to push even more cool stuff. So yeah, I think they're great. I think they're really cool,
Yeah,
man.
great.
So yeah, and then you moved on to, like you said, onto Naughty Dog in the stateside, and then how was that? Like, do you find that making levels for Uncharted was similar in a sense to that of Enslaved, or how did you find that, mate?
Yeah, so I joined for Uncharted 3 and
Mm-hmm.
I got there with about 9 months left of development. And I kind of figured because the lead up to shipping Enslaved, we had to have the game done and polished and bug fixed
Yeah,
like 3 months before it actually arrived in the shops.
yeah,
So I assumed the game would be like quite done at this point and I would get to play through bits of it and maybe I would get my hands
yeah,
dirty on the next project. And the game was, I mean, they've done like a crazy amount of work, but it was nowhere near as finished as I was expecting.
yeah.
And that's because Sony, it's an internal Sony studio. They don't have to have that big lead up. They work
Oh,
pretty much until like, I think it's like a month before it's shipped or like 3 weeks or something. It's something crazy. But so I got a level to work on. But because it was the third one, it was so easy just to slip into like those shoes because you've played 1 and 2, you know the
yeah,
tone, you know the scale, you know like the mechanics
yeah,
inside out. They might introduce one or two mechanics here and there, but yeah, it's a very comfortable sort of mode to slip into when you already know the game so
yeah.
right? You know the game well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
But I think the big change was the culture. Like they work
Mm,
really hard, and I had to learn how to script. I'd never
yeah,
scripted a line of code in my life before, and then I was like scripting combat sequences and things like that, and
yeah,
puzzles. I had the Yemen Temple, which was basically like 4 completely bonkers puzzles. Oh no, 3 puzzles really. Yeah,
yeah.
3 puzzles, but each of them was like an optical illusion.
I
That was
know which
just
one you
so
mean.
much
Yeah,
fun. That was like I really enjoyed that. And then I had another level which was the ship graveyard, which was just like flat out
that was great. That
crazy
level.
action combat.
Yeah,
So I had a lot of fun with that one as well. They were very, very different, but I enjoyed those two. And it was a very intense time of my life. And
yeah.
I think I enjoyed it though. I can't deny I enjoy that kind of thing.
Awesome, mate. No, paid off because that and Last of Us obviously huge successes, mate. And what they've done and some phenomenal
Yeah.
levels all you guys made. So seriously well
I felt
done.
much more comfortable on The Last of Us. I felt like I could actually script a sequence and write code at that point, and I felt like I'd learned the pipeline. So yeah, so Uncharted 3 was my training, and
Yeah,
The Last of Us was where I really sort of like felt a bit more confident and
yeah,
comfortable.
man. I was gonna say, like, with the when it comes, because it is something that I find, like, from me going from Division to Cyberpunk, is like, obviously there's combat in games and that, but the combat changes. In Uncharted it's a lot more bombastic, a lot of firing going on. But Last of Us, you can't go as crazy in certain moments due to the
No,
overpowering enemies and that. It's like, how did you find like switching over
Oh,
that style.
so I'll be honest. I'm not really a combat guy. Like I enjoy making a combat space because it's just a wide open
Yeah.
space that is interesting to traverse. But like, I'll confess, there are areas on Uncharted 3 that I couldn't beat the combats in my levels because Benson, the combat designer, would come in and put guys with rocket launchers in my levels.
Jeez.
And I was like, is this not too hard? I can't get past it. And he was like, no, it's absolutely fine. It's completely fine. And I would just skip to the next section, make sure he would like handle the combat. I would go on to the next section. So for The Last of Us, I was much more confident. And some of my levels have got zero combat in. I did like the bus depot with the giraffes.
Oh, wow, yeah.
There's like no enemies in there. And like and the hospital, that was like, I mean, there were some fights, but I would kind of like retroactively love to go and take half of them out because so when you were talking about you haven't got the bombast to sort of make a big action spectacle, that's a really good example. So the hospital in The Last of Us was our final level, so it had to be, basically it was our boss level, so it's our final boss, but we weren't going to have a final boss. This is a narrative story about Joel and Ellie, and you can't like have a big monster at the end of it with a glowing red weak spot. We have to do something else to make it feel final. And so I made the level, and initially the room in the end of the operating room was meant to be a cutscene. So you would open the door and you'd start a cutscene, and then the credits would roll, and that would be it.
Right.
And it felt terrible. It felt like really anticlimactic and surprising. You weren't expecting that to be the end. So you felt shortchanged. So I had to make it feel like it was the end of the game. So initially, like a couple of the other designers said, like, make the fight really like a big fight before you get to the end, so it feels like a big battle.
Yeah.
And that will be your final boss. So I put a fight in the top floor. Originally, the top floor was empty. That didn't do it for me. So I toyed around with making the operating room like a playable section, which is fine. That's going to be fine. But it still doesn't feel like there's a lot of gameplay there. There's not a lot of reason to make it playable, other than sort of you feel a little bit more empathy and guilt with what Joel has to do to rescue Ellie. You have to kill the doctor. And if it happens in a cutscene, you're like, Joel, that was horrible of you. If you have to do it with the controller, it feels different. And that's part of what makes games quite magical. And then I got the opportunity to elaborate on that section and have Joel carry Ellie out of the hospital, which to me fixed the problem of it not feeling like the end, because him carrying Ellie looked like him carrying Sarah at the first level. So the story had come full circle, and you were reminded again of why he was doing this crazy thing to rescue Ellie. Is because Ellie is his replacement for Sarah, and you're reminded of that by the imagery. And that for me fixed a lot of the problems there. So I was like, okay, cool. This feels now like an ending. And it's like a very unique moment in the game. So it feels different and special. And but it's very difficult to try and make quieter moments feel, I don't know, loud enough for people to take notice.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you have any tips then on that, mate? Like if you could give advice to someone who's facing a similar challenge to that, do you have any like tips that you think would help?
Yeah, I think it's about, so if you take like the giraffe moment, I did a lot of work, and I'm not the person to say whether this works or not. This is what my intentions were when I was making it. I know that walking up to an animal and petting an animal could have well been like a very sort of throwaway moment. Like you go and pet cats when you're walking down side streets in like RPGs, and it doesn't feel like a big moment. But I think it's about the build up, and it's about tension. Like pretty much everything we do is about sort of building an atmosphere and building tension. And that doesn't mean necessarily tenseness. It's just sort of like creating anticipation, creating release, that kind of thing. And so for that moment in The Last of Us, there's like 4 or 5 moments that are quite frustrating glimpses of what this creature is, but I don't give you a satisfying moment where you see a giraffe. If you walked around the corner, as soon as you sort of climbed up the ladder with the Ellie boost moment, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with this section, but if Ellie said, oh, there's something here, and you walk around the corner and there's a giraffe and you pet it, I don't think it would have been as impactful. So it's all about creating this anticipation and tension leading up to the moment you want to be impactful. So you chase Ellie around like 4 or 5 corners through 3 or 4 different rooms across a bridge with like muddy broken glass. So you see the giraffe through the broken glass, but it's not a satisfying view of it. There's a moment where it's on the outside of the building and you're on the inside, and you can see its shadow cast onto the dirty windows, but you can't, at this point, you're not even sure what it is. And then you see it through a broken wall, but it immediately walks out of shot. So you don't get a nice moment there. And then when you do finally get the moment where you can see the giraffe properly and you can walk up to it and pet it, you've had these moments of frustration that sort of like allow for a much bigger moment of release, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, it's about building suspense and tension and anticipation. I think that will help smaller moments ring true.
Awesome, man. That's some great advice there, man. Some cool stuff as well. Like, I think that's one thing that we as developers, especially in AAA space, don't always get the chance to do, is to build up these quiet and more serene kind of moments. You know, it's very
Yeah,
rare you get a chance. Like, we were just chatting about bombastic combat. That's more in your day-to-day life. I find working on games is about these
mm.
cool combat setups, shit goes boom, all of that stuff. So it's very cool to hear like how you set that up. And also, like, for me, I got a memory of like playing with my stepmom. She's not a huge gamer, but like she was
Mm.
just watching me play and seeing the draft. It was a nice moment. I think like she just enjoyed that. So nice little story
That's
for you there,
cool.
mate.
That's cool. Yeah.
So after that, then, buddy, we're here now with congratulations again to you and your team at Media Molecule with Dreams now, mate.
Yeah, we did it. We
Yeah,
shipped
man.
it. Nobody,
Awesome.
nobody expected that.
I think that caught people more by surprise than the pandemic, mate. So
yeah. 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 If you're stuck for anything to do in this pandemic, our game has got a lot of, you could sink days into our
yes.
game.
Oh, and it's
Yeah,
great.
that's a good shout. It's a pretty wild time right now.
Yeah, man. I was gonna say, so like, because we talked a little bit off air, but your kind of role changed a bit, obviously, during the production of Dreams. And for those who don't know, Dreams is, I don't know how you'd start, like an editor for
Go on,
many
try.
create. All right, I'll try. See if I can help
Describe our game.
on my wings in marketing right now. But it seems to be like an editor that helps provide like release for creative inventions, whether that be games, movies, or music. You kind of have a huge array to play with. I don't even think I did it justice, but that's
No, I think that's quite good. That is quite accurate. So you don't just make games; you can
yeah,
make music or animations or any kind of interactive media. And yeah, so it's a game that you can play. We do have like a single player campaign that you can play through, and you can play everyone else's things that they make as well. So it's
yeah,
also, as well as it being a creative suite where you can make all these things, it's also a community. And that's probably like that was the moment where the game kind of revealed itself to me as to what it was, because up until we released it to the public, we thought it was one thing, and then we released it to the public in a public beta. Man, the game overnight like transformed in front of my eyes. It was one of the most surreal moments of my gaming career. I think it is.
yeah,
I've never had something like that happen to me, where we were making things online, putting them up, people were commenting on your levels, people were reporting bugs, people were sort of like sharing your levels, and you were doing the same to them as well. The community is absolutely amazing for Dreams. It's just like the
yeah,
most wonderful, supportive like bunch of people, and it's remained, even though like for the beta it was a small tight knit community, and it's obviously expanded and changed as the game has been released to a wider and wider audience, but it's
yeah.
still maintained this nice personal friendly atmosphere, and it's really cool.
Yeah, man. I mean, I also think part of that comes to how you guys have your tools set up, because it's fun with the little like, don't know how to describe it, the blob pointer that you have.
Oh yeah,
It,
the imp. Yeah.
yeah, all of that like brings a little bit of joy to you. How can you be mad when you got this
Well,
smiling, giggling thing with you?
yeah, well, the whole point is, so it comes from a couple of little sort of ideologies. Firstly, making stuff is good for you, right? You
Yeah,
find this, you're a designer, I'm a designer. We like to make things. Why do
yeah,
we like to make things? It just feels good to make something. You get a thing at the end of it that you can look at and feel proud of and feel productive. So even if it's not professionally, but if it's as a hobby, like making things is, for me, this is like part of my philosophy. Like making things is good for your soul.
all right,
It's calming, it's relaxing. It helps you work through like problems in your head.
yeah,
It's so creative, and so we want that for everybody. Basically, we do it professionally. Obviously, we've managed to sort of wangle our way into it to be a thing that we can get paid for, but not everyone's going to have that. But
yeah,
we want that kind of feeling for everybody. So what we try to do is we try to make a tool that makes it so fun to make things that people don't realize that they're making things. Because if you
yeah,
go and ask anybody, are you good at art? They'll say, no, I'm not talented. I've never been that way
yeah,
inclined. I've never been good at drawing. And this is where like a word like talent, I think, is really misleading. It's kind of a horrible word, because people think they've either got it or they haven't. And that will stop people trying new things. They're like, I'm not musically talented. I'm not like artistically talented. So I'm not going to carry on doing those things because I'm no good at them. the first time you ever draw something, of course it's bad. It's your first try.
Yeah.
If you look at it and say, that's how good I will always be, you'll never try again, which means you'll never improve. So we make this game so fun that people make something and they have a good time doing it. They build up like a base level of like 5 or 10 hours of like art experience or music experience, and they've grown, they've got better at it, and that means that when they look back at what they've made, they'll feel proud of it, which means they'll carry on making, which means they'll get better at it, and it starts this nice upward spiral of like improvement, which is much more healthier way to think of talent as a thing that you can grow and build with experience than it is to think of it as something where you either have it or you don't.
Oh,
So that's like basically why we've made a creative suite feel like as engaging and as enjoyable to use as a game would be. And also it's a PlayStation game. It needs to feel good.
Yeah, mate.
We're trying to put our skills of making games sticky and fun and enjoyable to play to better use, if you know what I mean. So we try to make an editor through that mentality.
I think it's great, and I think also as an editor, it has a ton of personality versus that of traditional editors that you have, which obviously can do a lot, but they're not making an editor to be fun. We both know that they're making an editor to be functional.
They don't have to. That's the thing, isn't it? They just have to make an editor that does the job as efficiently as possible. So that's why it gets bought by. I mean, like if you get Maya and then you turn up at a new studio and they're like, we use Maya to build our block meshes, then you're going to be being paid to learn Maya for 8 hours a day. So there's nothing better to do. You may as well sit down and learn Maya properly, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a professional tool. That's where it lives in the professional space. Yeah. But we don't have that luxury. Nope. If our game's no good, then people are going to just stop playing it and go and like play something else. And we have like video games, one of the most engaging entertainment sort of spheres in the world to compete with. If our game isn't sticky, then like people are going to go and play something else. It's kind of crazy.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And I was going to say, like, so when you guys, because obviously the main kind of feature of Dreams is to create and to allow people to create, but you guys also worked on a campaign. And I guess, how is it like to make a campaign and also, I guess, use it to teach players as well? Because that must have been one heck of a balancing act.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think I was on the campaign team for a couple of years, and then I think maybe a year and a half ago, I moved on to like other areas of the game and trying to teach the controls. So basically anything to do with like the home space or the tutorials or the intro sequences and things like that, to try and like gently nudge people from playing the game to making it the game and making the experience for first-time players that hadn't played a lot as seamless and effortless as possible. But I think like the mentalities for the team that finished off the campaign was very much, they wanted to make something as honestly as possible with the tools that it could inspire people and show people what the tools were capable of. So it was very much a showcase of the tools and not necessarily like an educational package where you could say, this is how you make a game. So you can't open up the Dreams to levels and reverse engineer how they're built because the things that they're trying to do are so complicated and so polished that it would just be a little bit intimidating and a bit misleading. But we do, so the stuff that I moved on to actually is entirely focused on letting players open up what we've made and see how they've been made. So we've made kits, like level bash kits with mechanics in. So maybe it's got like a bunch of props in them, or maybe it's got like a bunch of contraptions, like things like bounce pads and fans and little coins. And then I've also made levels with those kits that I've built. And I've literally made levels with the idea that people will look at them and learn game design through playing them. So it is quite fun, but like I think the campaign was definitely more of the skew of we want to make something that shows how far the tools can be pushed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're very educational to open up and read through, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get you. It sounds like such a tough one. You said
it's tough. There's definitely like a choice you have to make at some point where you like say, should we make it simpler so it's easy for people to understand, or should we make it more complicated because polish is complicated, and make it very impressive? So you just have to make that choice.
I was gonna say, like, who do you find that falls on that choice? Is it on you with your team when you're making these kind of tutorial sections as well as the editor side, or does that come up from a director level? How does that choice come together, mate?
I think it is like a collaborative decision. Like you have to work out what you want to make. You have to be on board with what you're making with everyone that you're making it with. But yeah, like the directors and basically everyone weighs in on most decisions at Media Molecule. It's for a small team, it's quite a noisy one.
That's a great that's encouraged.
It's encouraged. Everyone is definitely encouraged to voice their opinion and voice their concerns. Let everyone know what they think.
Oh man, that's awesome. I was gonna say, like, now that it's been released, how have you found seeing other people's work in that? Because there's been some great stuff I've seen on Twitter.
It's terrifying. They're so fast. People are just making things so fast. It's really crazy. But yeah, I've been very impressed by like the quality bar when we released like the final game. I thought the hardcore creators would have all got on board with the early access. So I didn't necessarily expect a jump in quality when we released the game. But I think also what happened was a lot of the creators from early access were like keeping their creations private and like tinkering away on them for the final couple of months to release them for the release. Like they were shipping to the same date as we were, if you know what I mean. But like, man, the quality bar has been raised so high in the last couple of months. It's so cool and terrifying. I'm going to lose my job very soon.
I was going to say, when I look at some of these and then I look at my own portfolio and I'm like, damn, like you said,
it's great. We already have stories of people that made portfolios in Dreams and they've got jobs in the industry. Like,
awesome.
We joked about that in the studio before the game was released, and it's actually happened. And and there's so many cool things. Like I was chatting to a guy on Twitter that made a racing game. And this is a legitimate argument. Someone was like, if you're this good, why didn't you just make this in Unity and sell it? And he was like, I didn't know I could make games until I touched Dreams. So that's exactly what we want. We want people who don't feel like they have the ability to have an outlet to explore that creativity and build up that sort of resilience and that experience and get good and just blow everyone away with their talents, because there's so much untapped ability and talent out there that just needs a little nudge, needs a little bit of encouragement.
No, man, I think that's a testimony to you guys again on how you've made this so approachable, because I think if you take Maya, take any of these professional tools, that bar of entry, and it's really hard. Like I find that sometimes when you use even these new softwares, you learn, you're like, oh wow, I feel like an idiot no matter where you go. And
it's just built for a different purpose. Like I kind of love Maya. I grew up with Maya when I was I didn't grow up with it. I didn't even use a computer until I was at uni, but like it was the first tool that I used to make art, and it's the tool that I ended up using for a lot of my level designs throughout my career up until Media Molecule. And but yeah, it's just got a completely different audience, and it's got a completely different, I don't know, intention for that tool.
Yeah, mate. I know it's paid off, man. Like I said, it looks great. The stuff that I've seen on, I can't remember the dude's name, but there's a guy I follow on Twitter, and he made like Metal Gear Solid 1, recreated that, which is insane. I was like, what? Amazing.
It's interesting.
Very amazing. I was going to say, before we wrap things up, mate, I was going to ask, is there, out of all like your fun times as being an LD? Is there any like level design tips, like 3 or so, that you could give to those aspiring to be a level designer that you think are
Yeah.
important, man? He's pulling up a
So
list here, guys. I see
I
his
have, but
eyes.
it's all right because I get to call most of it because I think we've just nattered on for long enough that we could probably just go through like 1 or 2 of these.
I mean, if you want to go for
Um,
longer, mate, please feel free. I don't want to limit you.
oh no, it's okay. I'll just pick my favorites. So
Yeah.
I think my favorite level design tip that I always advocate everywhere I go, and yeah, I'm actually genuinely curious to hear your reaction to this because I don't know
Okay.
whether it's, I don't know, like, so I always tell people to build on uneven terrain because I feel like the kind of the death of level design is starting with a big flat sheet and building everything on the grid nicely. So I always tell people just sort of start off, like throw down some shapes that are sort of make some like undulating hills and some sort of rocky terrain and things like that, and then find your level inside, like in the contours of the hills and things like that, because it just has so many benefits to building levels. So it forces you to make really interesting architectural decisions. If you've got a flat plane, your buildings will be on the grid and they will just be generic buildings. They'll look really boring and uninteresting. But if you have like a steep slope, you have to think about where it's best to place this building.
Yeah.
Is it going to be a split level building? Like if you go in at the base of the building, walking up the hill, then you might have to go up some steps and you would emerge again on ground level, but on a different floor because it's built into the side of a hill or something like that. And it helps composition because not everything is going to be foreshortened by like this one single plane. You'll have like levels, you'll have buildings that are higher and that can sit higher in your frame, and buildings that are like lower so you can look down upon them and have a better overview of them. And it also forces designers off the grid, which I know grids are very useful. They're super useful for a lot of things, but they can be a crutch for, I think, for when building levels. So I always think when you play like multiplayer games and you look at the maps, you can tell that the whole map is on a grid.
Yeah.
Like I think I was Googling like Apex Legends maps, and you can see it's like a nice organic level. It's like a rocky canyon, but you can see the grid. It's just a straight grid. And then if you pull up like Google Maps and look at any city ever, it's all over the place. It's completely all over the place. And that's because Mother Nature was there first and we had to build our levels on top of what she gave us, right? Like it's not the other way around. We don't build towns and then like the hills ask politely where they can lie. It's just great. I always lay down a bit of uneven geometry and then I like place the levels. I find the levels inside of that. So that's always what I would advocate.
That's nice. I mean, I can't agree or disagree, sadly, because all of my main levels have been made in a city. You know, Division was New York City, so we already had like that was gridded out. Cyberpunk with Night City again, that's a cityscape too. So that's
it's interesting, yeah, because I think with you notice this. I think this is a British thing though. Like we live in medieval cities, right?
Yeah.
Like medieval cities, you will often. So I come from Durham, and Durham has got a castle and a cathedral. And just find a map of Durham if you're interested. But basically, you can work out exactly why that city is there and why and how they built it, because they wanted the cathedral to be at the safest point. And Durham has got a river that meanders really steeply into like a big curve, and it's got one narrow point. So you've basically got a free moat. Someone dug you a moat around 3 sides of your castle, and then there's and it's a steep bank up to the top of the hill. So it's really well defended. It's a really good like position of natural defense. So they put the cathedral there, and then at the narrowest point where the sort of the river's meanders come closest to each other, that's where they put the castle, so to defend that one point, the weakest point. And then the city obviously tries to stick as close to the castle walls as possible so that they get the defense from the castle. And it's just way more interesting to me. But even cities that are like on a grid system,
well, I was going to say,
San Francisco is on a hill because of the estuaries are just so wide. So that's like a really good place to put a city because you get all the boats coming through the estuaries and things like that.
Well, I was going to say, even like, because your point still is, even if it's about hills or gridded cities, height variation is just such a
massive.
And I agree with you on that one. Like I said, like, made more gridded based levels and more man-made structures, but I agree with you. Like just having some form of height variation is so important. Even if it's say something like 20 centimeters, just to signify this area is slightly lower for whatever reason, to a whole second floor with a catwalk above it. All of that helps to break it up. So now I agree with you. I think that's really important. And it
Yeah.
spices up your level too. Like I was saying, it's so easy to just walk into a room or just part of a level and you can see everything so clearly. So when you break it up, yeah, man, I agree.
Yeah,
Agree with
definitely.
you, brother.
And just having a big old river, like you must have found this with New York, a big old river, you're not going to be able to change where that river is. So like even
Nope.
though New York is on a grid,
Yeah.
the grid kind of like all goes to pot when it comes against the bank of the river because it just has to fit against the side of the.
Well, I mean, that's why it built up. You know, that's why there's so many tall buildings, because they couldn't build out, built up instead. So yeah, exactly that.
So that's like one of the points. I think that's my favorite because I don't hear a lot of people talking about that. So I'm not sure. It could be because I'm wrong, but I'm not sure.
I don't think so, bro. I think you're right. Like I said, I sadly wish I could agree more because I don't do more organic levels. But in terms of
it's
high
fine. Like none of my
variation,
levels in The Last of Us they don't really conform to this because I think this is all stuff that I formed after working at Naughty Dog. But I went back and I was playing through some of my levels in The Last of Us, and I was like, don't really stick to any of my own rules, really, do I?
Dude, like that's one of the funniest things is I have like a notepad on my computer, like breaking down kind of rules and things that I should adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, some days, like so I'll just look at it and I'm like, oh fuck, I forgot to do that. I need to think about that one. Yeah.
Do you know what? I think that makes a good point. I think these aren't rules; they're like suggestions.
Guidelines,
If you're stuck, if you're stuck and you need a bit of inspiration, then like maybe chucking in like a hill in an inconvenient area might sort of like inspire you to carry on building your level. But yeah, don't take these as gospel. Another point that I've got is just letting your space grow naturally. So something that we might do if we're in a bit of a rush is we'll just build the critical path, which is the area that the spaces that the player has to go through to complete the level, and then that's the level done. But that will probably end up building a very unbelievable space. So it'll be a space that doesn't really resemble a real world space that has a function other than being a level that you want to play through. So I would always advocate just trying to work out exactly what you want the space to be quite early on, so that as soon as you've got your critical path mapped out, you can start to embellish it and build on it and build off these sort of, I don't know, extraneous spaces that aren't critical to the game, but they make the space feel more like a real world place that existed before this video game decided to pass through it, if you know what I mean. So if it's a waiting room, then there might be bathrooms like off to the side of it or something else, or there might be like a utility cupboard where like cleaning products are stored. And just thinking about things like, would there be disabled access to this space? Because there would in real life, and as soon as there isn't, it's like a subconscious thing, like people will notice that something's missing if it would be present in real life. And it just goes a little way to sort of making it not feel like a video game, if you know what I mean. And it also just, it can lead to other opportunities. So you might start building all these extraneous spaces and then realize that there's a cooler path that you could take, and it'll just help the level evolve. And I don't know, I always find that a really fun exercise.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That was something I was taught as well, as that you use like, how would the space be used before everything in the game took place. So it's a great tip. That's a really good one.
Yeah, I think so, because there's like layers of story that you can kind of tell, and I think you'll be surprised at how often that doesn't trip up gameplay. Like if you are adding in all these extra details, sometimes people will be like, well, this doesn't mesh well with our metrics for our gameplay, this isn't low cover and things like that. But it doesn't always trip it up, and if it doesn't trip it up, then there's no reason not to build it. I think when I'm talking about this, I'm particularly thinking about the bus depot in The Last of Us, because it basically had like 3 levels of story. So there was the fact that it was a bus station before the pandemic, and then when the pandemic hit, it became a sort of like a pop-up medical sort of hotspot where they would sort of triage people, and then from there, because they had buses and it's a central point in a city, because it's a bus station, they would either put people on buses and take them to the hospital if they needed more medical attention, or they would take them to a quarantine city where it was safer. So it was like, and then there was sort of the third story, which was everything that happened after that. So it was like nature reclaiming it and things like that. So it was a lot of fun to sort of like layer in those stories in a real world space and try and make it feel believable. So when I build a space, actually, have you just moved apartments?
Yes, I have.
Recently? Right. So tell me how different the space was. Did you ever see it completely unfurnished, like completely empty?
This apartment.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen it. I was partly furnished. I never saw it completely
partly
empty, but I
furnished.
saw it partly furnished. Yeah, before it all
So I've
came out.
always thought how interesting it is when you experience like a completely unfurnished house, and then you come back and you're like, okay, this is massive. This is huge. We're going to
Yeah.
be like living like kings. And you put all your furniture in, and it feels tiny. And
Mhm.
you're like, what happened to the space? It
Yeah.
didn't shrink or something, did it? So this is like a, a cautionary tale for people laying out their levels or blocking out their levels, because we'll only put the critical things in there that are critical to gameplay, right?
Yeah.
So we feel like we've made these big cavernous spaces that are big enough for combat, and you can dance around the space, and there's
Yeah.
loads of room to maneuver the enemy. And then artists will obviously come in and put furniture in the space, because it wasn't an empty office block. It was full of desks and filing cabinets and things like that. And all of a sudden it feels absolutely tiny, and it's not big enough to accommodate your art and your gameplay. So something that I'll always advocate is just chucking in, I use like 1 meter by 1 meter boxes.
Yeah.
And I just like put them all around the side of the rooms where there would be like desks and things, and I put them all in the middle of the room. So I block out where furniture would be, so that I know that the space is big enough to accommodate both the gameplay that I intend to live in there, and also the art that is inevitably going to furnish the space. So just save yourself the hassle of trying to resize entire buildings worth of spaces by just chucking those in, so you can gut check if you've got enough space for both art and design.
Yeah.
I remember doing that a lot in the university level, because that was going to be a combat space.
Yeah.
And so I just had a lot of fun. Sort of, I built the space, and then I was like, this is cool. And then I played against a bunch of enemies, and then I started putting in furniture, and I literally doubled the size of every single room. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm a plus one on that fact, mate. Like the other thing that you mentioned earlier then about making things slightly smaller is adding in that of like, say if I've got a desk, I'll put in like a tiny square to maybe represent that of a computer screen, just so I know
Yeah.
if I aim over it, I'm like, shit, does this block the line of sight, or can I move it around? So yeah, no, I completely agree with you, mate. Completely agree.
Cool. I wasn't lying. That's good to know.
I didn't want to say it, but one of these points, be like, sorry, mate, that's not
That's actually not true. You're an idiot.
It's
You've
always
been very
nerve wracking. I find when you share this stuff, because you're like, please say I'm not an idiot. Please say I'm not.
Well, it's
an idiot.
interesting. I just don't find there's. I mean, maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but I don't always find there's that much of a design, like level design community to like bounce ideas off. So a lot of this stuff, I'm literally saying for like the first or maybe second time, and I'm just very curious to hear your reaction to it.
Well, I think also what's crazy to think is like, because me and you have lived in different firstly different parts of the country, and then we've gone different countries around the world, and then just hearing some of your thought processes, I'm like, oh yeah, we do something similar, maybe slightly different, but we do something similar. We've never met, and I always think that's pretty interesting as well. So yeah, I agree, man. I agree.
All right, I have 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna try this last point. I think this might be the most interesting. It's not necessarily a level design thing, but it's definitely something a level designer has to bear in mind. Mm-hmm. So it's the point that how a game feels isn't dictated by any one thing. So if you break it down to like where the camera sits on the player, so if it's third person, like how far back it is, how small the player is on the screen. So you've got your camera position, and the player's movement, so how fast you can run, how high you can jump, things like that. And then the scale of your environment. So all of those three things are heavily interlinked. They're all linked together really, really tightly. And if you change one, the others are going to feel weird. So I always use the example of if you look at the size of doors in World of Warcraft, they're like gigantic because the camera's really zoomed out. The camera's really far back. And what you've got to remember is like the player's head isn't the size of the player's head. It is basically a circle that encompasses the player's head and also the camera. So if your camera's really far zoomed out, like you're going to have to accommodate a huge sphere that's sort of like bobbling around in the game world. And then you notice like as you go from like World of Warcraft where it's really zoomed out to like maybe Uncharted where it's slightly closer in, the doors are slightly smaller to accommodate the size of the camera. And then you go to like The Last of Us where the camera's even closer. Mm-hmm. The doors are getting closer to real world scale, and then first person doors are almost real world scale, and then VR is like doors are real world scale. So like so you have to sort of think of not necessarily like just one aspect of your character system. You have to think, just to make a level that feels the right size, you have to think, like, consider a lot of elements. And Uncharted and The Last of Us are quite good examples of this, because you notice that if you make the character move faster, so Nathan Drake can run quite a lot faster than Joel, and he can jump higher, and that is what pushes the camera further out, so you've got more peripheral vision, you can see your environment around you, and you can make decisions in time according to how fast Drake can move. And then also the level design is more exaggerated because you can move faster. So if you want to sort of like run across a platform and do a jump, and then the platform needs to be a certain length and the jump needs to be a certain distance for that movement to not feel rushed and not feel claustrophobic. So all of those things combined are going to basically culminate to create a game feel. So and that's a very intentional process. So we wanted The Last of Us to feel more intimate and more deliberate. And so that meant slowing the player down so that they move more slowly through the world, which meant pushing the camera in, which meant making sort of like more claustrophobic levels. And that's a very deliberate decision that makes the tone of the game feel slightly different to happy-go-lucky Uncharted. Yeah, so that's basically a very convoluted way of explaining how to make a game feel how you want it to feel.
No, I mean, we've got, in Ubisoft, we had the same thing, but we referred to it as the 3 Cs: character, controller, camera. Basically the same thing of, camera, how, like you said, how far and wide it is. Character was a bit more like in storytelling, but again, how close were you going to be with what you wanted to say in terms of their movement? And then camera was obviously close as well. So distance between. So like very similar things, slightly different in terms, like you mentioned, about scale and that. But that was like called 3 Cs.
Well, that's the level design aspect to it, I think. Like, if you can move really fast, then your environments are going to have to scale up to accommodate that. Like, have you played Control?
Yes.
I absolutely love Control. I think it's amazing.
Great. Really good.
So there are areas in that game that feel correct for the player's movement, like big, open, like cavernous atriums where you're sort of like dashing about and fighting people. And then you'll find like a bathroom, and it feels really like it's not built for and it's not on the critical path, so it doesn't matter. But your camera's like bouncing off the walls because it's a small enclosed space, and you're sort of like struggling, sort of like getting like bumping around because it's a small space. So that's just sort of like an example of the space not being large enough to accommodate the camera and the player's movement. And I didn't mean it to sound like a criticism of that game, because I absolutely loved like it, but I think it's a good example. You can literally bounce between 2 spaces and feel the difference.
No, I mean, I'm not like so I'll quickly wrap up on this one because you got to get going, but like I loved the same with the Arkham series of Batman. When you have him just walking, he takes up nearly like 3/4 of your screen because the camera's so close. And similar to Uncharted, when he starts to run, the camera pulls back because it's important to see more of the world. So I agree, man. I agree.
You can change your parameters on the fly. So if you go through, if you're in detective mode, then you completely change your movement set. You've got a much slower walking speed. You've got a much closer camera. That's totally fine. But it's just something to consider.
No, for sure.
Cool.
But we'll wrap this one up, mate. Thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate you, mate. And hopefully we'll get you on for another show, man. This has been great fun. So you can talk about more of your points.
Cool. Oh, thank you. I've had a really good time. Thank you,
man. It's been brilliant. All we need is a second pandemic and we'll get the other episodes recorded.
We'll do one in like 10 years' time.
All right, brother. Well, I'll wrap this one up. So for anyone who wants to get in contact with you, how's the best way to reach you?
Probably Twitter. So it's Peter__field. I think there's 2 underscores in there.
I will put a link to that in the description, people. So if you want to reach out to Peter, he'll be there for you all.
I check that regularly enough. So if you want to get in touch, just chat to me on that.
Awesome. And if you want to get in touch with me, then you can do so, which is me on Twitter, which is @MaxPairs, or you can email into the show, which is leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. So thank you all very much, and we'll catch you all next time.